and with me always is Jim Fitzgerald. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing well, Ray. I hope you are too.
Outstanding. On this episode of Cold Red, we're going to take you behind the headlines and straight into the space where media, power, and murder collide. Our guest is Allison Hope Weiner, an Emmy Award winning investigative journalist who has spent her career at the center of some of the most high profile and controversial criminal cases in the country. From the courtroom to the newsroom, she's worked alongside some of the biggest names in journalism, including Diane Sawyer, Dan Abrams, and has reported for outlets like the New York Times, ABC's 2020, and News Nation. But Allison didn't start in journalism. She began as an attorney, and that legal mindset gives her a perspective few reporters have. She just doesn't just follow the story. She dissects the evidence, challenges the narrative, and asks what's missing from the version of events the public is being sold. In her book, that she's going to tell us all about, Murder in the Media, Allison pulls back the curtain on four gripping cases, from the trial of Robert Blake to the tragic killing of Amy Harwick to the haunting case of Holly Bobo, revealing critical details, unseen evidence, and a powerful role the media coverage plays in shaping what we think we know. Tonight, we're not just talking about the crime, we're talking about influence, perception, and the line between truth and storytelling. Because when the cameras are rolling and the stakes are life and death, the question isn't just what happened, it's who controls the story. Allison, welcome to Cold Red.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. That's a great introduction. Thanks, Ray.
Sure.
I'd like to add too, Allison is also our friend. And
Exactly.
I've known Allison for a long time. She started right out of high school. She's not as old as some of her background makes her seem. So
Thank you.
I always want to thank you. I think I really cut my teeth in the media with a show that you had back in the day. I mean, I think I did okay, but I certainly honed my skill set looking into a camera, asking questions on, kind of on the run, answering questions on the run, although we always prepared and you send me questions beforehand. So I miss those days. It was a successful internet show, but I know you've moved on since then. So Allison, it's great to have you now returning the favor, so to speak, on our podcast of Cold Red with me and Ray. So again, on my behalf, going back at least about 10 years, welcome to Cold Red.
Thank you. Thanks.
I not only did it by Zoom with you, maybe even other ways back then, but I actually visited your Los Angeles studio at least once, I think a few times, and we did some shows from there too. So again, it was a great way to learn a bit about media. You were always very kind to this seasoned investigator, FBI agent, profiler, all that stuff, but kind of new in front of the bright lights, whatever. But I always do appreciate that.
Allison,
That makes me feel good.
Allison, you covered some of the most high-profile murder cases in the country. What's the one case that still doesn't sit right with you?
Wow, that's an interesting one. The ending of the case, or how it was resolved?
Well, what doesn't, regardless of how it was resolved, how it started out, what doesn't sit right with you in one of those cases? And you may have several of them.
I do. I mean, I have to say, and I'm thinking about it. I mean, I think Holly Bobo was one of those cases. And that's in my book. And I think that's part of why it stayed with me. The investigation at the beginning, it focused on the family almost up until the end, to the exclusion of them looking elsewhere when they should have, the investigators. But mostly, there was such a circus quality and a re-victimization of that family. And I had a chance, and I write about it in my book, to talk to them before the trial even started. I held off on publishing anything, but they let me into their home, and we sat there, and it was in that house as if everything was kind of stuck in time. They were waiting for the trial to happen. Holly Bobo was a 20-year-old nursing student. She was only 20, same age as my daughter at the time. Really beloved by everyone, came from a very loving family, was living at home with their parents in the middle, basically, of nowhere in Darden, Tennessee, in a place that you would think was safe. So I initially was really struck as I drove there. It was 3 hours from Nashville, by how deserted and, far away from the crime of Los Angeles it was. I didn't expect, it's not a place you would expect for something so horrific to happen. She was abducted from her own driveway, was about to go and take an exam for nursing school that morning. And the family just went through hell. 3 years trying to find her, wondering what happened to her, kind of probably a lot what the Guthrie's family is going through, wondering what happened, concerns about the investigation, being targeted by the TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, one guy not targeting them, but going after someone else that they didn't believe was involved. And ultimately, they landed on the right suspects, but it took so long. And before the trial started, there were 3 years of harassment by the local community. There's some sort of online internet thing for small towns that everybody was on, accusing the brother. He had a breakdown. I think were it not for this family's like very deep faith, they never would have survived, any of them. And I was led into that with Karen Bobo, who showed me like that every night she wrote in a journal to God, begging for him to bring Holly home. And it was just when they found her remains 3 years later, she threw out half of those books. She said she just had lost. How could God do this to them? And I think even though they kind of knew she was dead, it's not the same. And you guys probably know this even better than I do. But I had a very up close seat in this one to win, and I so empathized with this family. They were like, one of my friends described it as like an open autopsy. They were in so much pain. It was just I drove back to Nashville after meeting with them, and I talked to my friend who was representing them pro bono. He had taken on the task of keeping the media from like destroying them any further, keeping charlatans away. There were psychics. There was some woman who came on board to help them with the media and help them investigate. And they believed in her and they thought she would be helpful. And Karen Bobo told me she was used. She said that it was time for them to go on TV. And the woman said to Karen, "You need to change your outfit. You have black on. It makes you look guilty." And I was like, oh my God. So even the people they're bringing on board or paying for assistance, it was a nightmare. And they were regular people. She was a school teacher, Karen. He worked like in the tree business, and of trimming trees and also construction. And Dana, that was the husband. And Clint was her brother, who got to the point of such despair that he kept saying, why wasn't it me? And he was there when she was abducted and wasn't able to stop it. It didn't compute with him that somebody was, kidnapping his sister, which makes sense given where they were.
Allison, there's a lot to the case itself, but what I'm interested in is and unfortunately, we have too many of these cases in this country. We're a big country and a lot of bad things happen. But of all the cases out there, what attracted you to this one to get involved very early on and be as supportive as you were to the family?
Well, I had a friend who's a very famous criminal defense lawyer that lives in Mississippi. And I didn't know he was involved yet. So I will say, but that is sort of how I got to meet the family. That's a difficult thing to do as an investigative journalist, especially before a trial, because they don't want to do anything that might impact the case. I was interested because it just struck me initially that one of the defendants that they had arrested was mentally challenged, and there had been some misconduct as far as I was concerned. When I heard about it, I spoke to the defense attorney first. He may have been involved. I believe he was involved in the end after watching the whole trial, but the way they went about it, he was arrested on a federal charge. They that a weapons charge that was a little dicey. He didn't really have the weapon. His friend had the weapon, and then they used that. He went home, got out on bail, and was watched by somebody in law enforcement. He was living with them, and they got him to confess. He came back, but he was simple. He had a lot of challenges, and I thought, oh, okay, now we're looking at something that's some sort of misconduct. That doesn't mean somebody's not guilty. It just means that I thought that the process there was something sneaky about the process, and something not quite legal about the process is what I thought. And sometimes I look for that. It just was, especially after I had been in Tennessee in another case where the district attorney had been engaged in a lot of prosecutorial misconduct. So that kind of caught my eye. And it doesn't mean, and I'll say this, that prosecutor, it seemed like that prosecutor had to go the extra mile and not do things by the book, even when they had the evidence. So that it was troubling, but nonetheless, that's sort of caught my eye at first. And I went through all different kinds of things, feelings on that case when I come to investigate or to write my stories. And I actually was working for ABC at the time, but I thought about writing about it. I try to just keep an open mind. Whoever got arrested may not be guilty. Whatever happened might be wrong. I try to not make assumptions because that's not my role. And this was it caught me, I think, too, because the girl was 20 and my daughter was interested in nursing. Blonde, blue eye. It hit me as a parent.
Sure.
That doesn't happen that often because I generally can sort of compartmentalize. But this was just so random, and she was so innocent. And it had nothing to do with her. I mean, it turned out to be people in the neighborhood who had drug problems, including the young man that wasn't sort of properly, his confession had some issues for me. But, and the other thing that intrigued me was that the guy that was cooperating with the authorities was probably the guy that killed the defendant that was cooperating. He wasn't a defendant. The guy they were three men were charged. And the guy that ended up being the cooperating witness, he was the first one to take a deal. He was the guy I thought orchestrated everything. And he was pure evil. And that was a very rare thing for me to say. Wow. When I listened to him in court, he was a complete sociopath. The jury laughed with him against the defense attorney. He was clever and amusing and told a good story, and he clearly was the ringleader. And well, but and it was just, but my interest was piqued by the characters involved, but also by some of the legal issues that case presented. And then on a personal level, it hit me a little in my heart.
You know, your instincts as an attorney can really change how you see a crime scene or a case. And I hear that in your discussion or your overview of some of the cases you're talking about. What do most journalists get wrong because they don't have your background?
They believe everything that they're told, the law enforcement. I mean, they just decide. It's kind of what we've seen with Guthrie initially until everybody began to realize that there were some issues with law enforcement, but they believe whatever leak they get. If it's law enforcement leaking, if it's the defense attorney who's leaking, if it's, family member who's leaking something, whatever information they get to run with, because that gives them, especially now, gives them an edge on everybody else. They have something that everybody else doesn't have, which doesn't necessarily mean it's true. You can't just grab that piece of information that's going to get you, the hits or, get you the attention or get people watching. You have to be sure it's true. You have to question, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with this your entire career. What is the motivation for somebody telling me something? What's in it for them?
Sure.
And that's what I think that all the time. When somebody is giving me information, I'm like, okay, so they want to bias the jury, like whatever comes next. If they're, they want them to think this way. And I've had defense lawyers do it to me. I've had prosecutors do it to me, and I have to step back, even if I like whoever's talking. And for some of these defense attorneys, they're really quite charming and convincing. I mean, they've honed great skill. They're kind of the movie stars of the courtroom. And so you have to really be skeptical. If they give you a piece of information, you better run it down. And I think a lot of journalists also decide somebody was murdered, the police have arrested someone, so they're guilty. And they even talk like that on the air, or they write like that. They say alleged, but they clearly don't think it's alleged. That's not to decide who did something. But it is our job to make sure that if somebody's giving us information about a case, that we have 1, 2, hopefully 3 sources that can back that up. And on Guthrie, when we got information, I mean, I will never go with one source. At the New York Times, I don't know what it's like now, but back when I wrote for the New York Times, I had 2 sources, and I had a cover story coming out on Private Eye to the Start, Anthony Pelicano, and they asked me to get a 3rd, and I was so angry because we were so close to like publishing. But I went and got a 3rd. I mean, if you're going to really announce something that's exclusive and you have a tidbit that nobody knows about, or breaking news that really is going to shock or engage or move the story forward, I guess I should say, make sure it's right and they don't bother.
With
They
that
just
said, with that said, Allison, did you ever cover a case where your
Excuse me.
instincts were telling you one thing, but the media narrative was going in a totally different direction?
Yes. When I did the Robert Blake case, it was pretty clear. First of all, I covered it when I was at Entertainment Weekly. He hadn't been arrested. There was the murder. Harlan Braun was his defense attorney. He was one of the greats. He's a great defense attorney. And he was at the murder scene. Blake called him right away. They didn't have the gun wasn't his. He had the weirdest alibi in the world. He had gone back to the restaurant to actually get his gun while his wife was shot and murdered. And for that year, the defense attorney worked to really dirty up the victim. It didn't take that much work, but before Robert Blake was arrested a year later, when Robert Blake was finally arrested, they charged him with the murder without being able to put a gun in his hand. It was the wrong charge. And everybody's like, he's guilty, he's guilty. How could he have gotten off? And I was like, hey, look at what happened here. I mean, they couldn't prove that he'd hired someone because the people they were calling were all kind of stuntmen with drug problems, and they didn't hold up on the stand in the preliminary hearing, which Tom Mesereau was now the lawyer. Blake went through a few lawyers after Harlan. So I felt like that they weren't paying attention. It was just careless and stupid. And they're just like, he went to get his gun. And if you talk to somebody now, they will say the same thing. They'll say that right back to you. Of course he did it. And I said, that gun didn't match to him. They never could put him together with the gun. So they also couldn't make the murder for hire because of those bad witnesses, but they didn't even charge him like with hiring somebody. It was stupid. I mean, they tried to make a case they couldn't at the very beginning, and I was never surprised at the outcome. And so that was very annoying as I went through that. And it was also kind of annoying too, not annoying, but very easy to see through Harlan Braun's attempts. I went to his office and he showed me pictures of the victim that she'd sent into Hustler. He gave me a list of all the celebrities that she had tried to scam, older men that she'd scammed out of their money. And just, I mean, and he said to me, I go, well, so are you going to be doing more TV? And he goes, I'm going to go on CNN because the Jury and Van Nuys, that's what they watch. So the whole thing was very calculated. Yes, the victim was not an upstanding citizen, but she had been shot in the head and was a victim and murdered and had a kid. So yes, I think it was 2 things going on at the same time. Plus, the detectives who investigated the murder brought a writer with them who was writing a book. And this is after OJ. So stupid. So there was a lot of, I just was like, and they actually said this was not a rush to judgment. They took a year because right on the heels of OJ, like they did not want that kind of an embarrassment. And the whole thing happened all over again. So,
Well, we discussed 2 stories, 2 cases and you
yeah.
were directly involved in the book. And I know it's a compelling read, and there's so much more to these cases. We're just scratching the surface now. But take us back a little bit. You went to law school, and did you think you're going to be an entertainment litigator, or were you leaning in that direction? How did that path right out of law school lead to you getting involved in the entertainment business, hosting later your own shows, and now you book other people to go on shows? You've worn so many hats over the years. Now author, but how did it all begin? If we can go back there.
Well, I was in law school. I love law school. It's a very intellectual questions and a lot of fun, and it's not real. So you're arguing with people, and they're arguing back with you about important issues, but you don't there's nothing really at stake except for winning and getting good grades, and I was a student and I've always been a student. So that was fun. Um, when I got into the real world, it was not my thing. It was boring. There was some research to do, but a lot of it's formulaic. In the entertainment industry, we were representing a lot of studios, not generally plaintiffs, against studios. All the money, I mean, there was it's when you bill like a studio, it would go, it's a deep pocket. It could go on forever. So you represent MGM or you represent Universal, and that's what we were doing. And it was boring. It was not creative. And it was real. So basically, I felt like I was moving money from one rich person or one rich corporation to another rich corporation. There just wasn't any purpose to it. And I decided I wanted to write a book. And I wrote the book of me. It's like every first author writes like a tome, and it was like 1,000 pages, and I could not get it published. So I started writing. I tried sending something into a magazine after I was an extra on Seinfeld. And let me just say this. I was an extra on Seinfeld for fun. I went with my little brother and we just wanted to see what it was like. And it was like one of the world's most humiliating jobs. So I wrote a piece, I sent it blind to Cosmopolitan, they bought it. I'm like, well, this is a fun job. Wasn't always that easy to sell things, but that's how I started in magazines, because people told me that if I had a career in magazines, then I would be able to get a book published. And before I worked in magazines for a bit freelance, and then I got a job at Entertainment Weekly doing legal things. I do legal disputes, James Gandolfini when he had held out on The Sopranos, or momagers who had like crossed the line, with Hillary Duff. So I did that for a while, and then I wanted to do more serious stories. I had represented with Howard Weitzman. We represented Ozzy Osbourne when I was a lawyer. And he had been sued civilly for Suicide Solution, a song he wrote because a young man had killed himself after listening to the song. And I helped to write the brief. And it was First Amendment. It was also very intellectual because you look at literature and you look at films and so it was like an English paper, and I was an English major. So I loved that. And when I started working at Entertainment Weekly, I started with a piece that was about this band Slayer, a similar kind of legal action, which was not successful either, because it's just, you can't know who's going to be reading your material, how they're going to react to that material. There's just the legal issues are pretty evident there, but it was purposeful. I was doing something that mattered, I felt, and I didn't feel that way as an attorney. And so I had this magazine career, then I went to the New York Times, then I had my show. I just kept trying to get to the point where I could write a book. And finally, it just only took me 25 years. Yeah.
Our audience is going to want to know what episode of Seinfeld, and did you in fact make it on the air?
I'm in the Babka episode where they're in the bakery, and there's also it's the Gore-Tex episode too. There is a party that Jerry and everybody's going to. George gets there and has to go buy a bottle of wine with Kramer, and they're knocking everything over. What was really kind of funny is it's filmed in California, and it was supposed to be a New York snowy night. So they had all of the extras bring their coats and New York outfits for this scene. You're supposed to bring 4 changes of clothing, and almost all of us had like a raincoat. It was all Californians. So, and I had a pink coat because I'd gone to school in New York for college, a pink puffer coat. And you're supposed to have very muted. You're not supposed to be the star, like in a bright pink coat. So yes, it was really fun. My brother did not come back the second day because the pay it was crazy bad. And but I was telling my other brother, who is a writer, about the experience and my mom, and they were laughing so hard because it was just so humiliating that they said, you should write this and send it to someone, see if you can get it published. And that's what I did, because I've always been a writer. So that was kind of, but the Seinfeld thing, it was partly just the adventure of it all, something different than being a lawyer. And it was also, Jerry Seinfeld was really good looking, and he was single at the time. So I figured.
Why not? Uh, well, that's a cool story. Yeah, I just watched someone on YouTube. He went through a whole litany of his 5 years as an extra, and he put some videos up, and there he is, he never played basketball in his life, but they have him dribbling a ball up a court like he's a high school, and just the different things. He said the only thing, you almost always got a good meal out of it. There's usually,
Yes.
because they have great food providers, if you will, and all kinds of vegan and gluten free and everything
Well, they
else,
didn't have that, but yeah,
but
they
no
had
but
craft.
no money.
Yeah, no, they had craft services, and it was so funny because the extras would say, "You should get on this show. They have a great buffet," and I would, they were great, and they thought it was a ticket to becoming a star. It's not really.
Yes, just because Brad Pitt was in, I think, some old Kevin Costner movie. There's one scene of him there, and look what happened to him. But he is definitely the outlier in that regard. Anyway,
Yes.
that's not why we brought you on, Allison, to talk about your one hit
Well, that's
with
how
Seinfeld.
it was very exciting, and
Yeah,
I did make everybody watch it, and it's still on YouTube, the Bobka episode.
our
There's only
audience
one
will check it
Bob.
out.
I'll have to check that
Yes.
one out.
Yeah. I think though that what you brought up is something worth talking about, because I think the state of media in these kinds of high profile cases is crazy. And I saw it in Coburger too. When I was there, the fight to be first trumps anything that's actually happening. It trumps the journalistic integrity of making sure that your information is correct. You want to be first. The pressure is there. And they also ask you, I mean, we weren't asked this at News Nation, and I wouldn't have done it anyway, but they had people following people home when they hadn't caught Coburger. So people that were working in bars got followed home, or some of the residents who lived near the house where the four individuals were murdered, the kids were murdered. It was just horrendous what I saw, what was going on. And it becomes a free for all. It's very traumatic, especially in these small towns when everybody descends on them. But there should be some sort of civility. That's one thing. That's just human. But worse than that, there should be some sort of counterbalance to what you're reporting. I heard they're saying. I mean, you see it in Guthrie too. Who are suspects? I mean, I don't know. They don't have a suspect at this point. But I will tell you that reporting with one source that so and so is a suspect, it goes against everything that is correct for journalism. And there are certain rules that should be followed, because you have a very powerful medium and you can destroy people with it. So you need to have some responsibility for what you're saying. And that I find it troubling. I found it troubling in the Bobo case when I saw, Karen Bobo told me people write books. Happened also in the, I don't know if you remember when uh in the Hartman case, where everybody would always tell me this, who are members of family, that there are all these people saying they're friends. They're fake friends. They're charlatans. They write books. They were best friends with Holly, or they're best friends with Robert, or they're best friends with whoever is involved. And people don't check. I'm like, do you know this person? When somebody calls me up, I'll call someone who is familiar with the family or a member of the family and ask, do you know this person? Is this true? Are they really a friend? Or is this just a hanger on or looking for their 15 minutes of fame?
I think in Hollywood, a lot of people have that question about people, and I should say in the entertainment business on the whole. Are they friends? Are they hanger-ons? Are they somebody, looking to get something from the celebrity, the star? A list, B list, C list. The friends kind of dissipate when it gets down to C or D list, but
Yeah.
then they move up to the A lister people. So yeah, it has to be a confusing. First of all, to be an entertainer or celebrity at that level and try to figure out, who really are my friends here. And I admire some of them you hear about. They still hang around with high school and college friends or neighborhood friends. You kind of know where they're coming from, even if you've made it into the stratosphere into some areas there. So yeah, and especially
But
when criminal cases come out. And boy, everything you just said, Allison, I was
I know.
in IRL, as the kids say. I was on Megyn Kelly's show back in the first week of February, and she had us come on early. And I'm listening to her interview, I think her friend, Ashley Banfield, and she's coming out and saying, police are looking at the brother-in-law. I think Tomas, I think that was his name.
Tommaso.
Is his name.
Mhm.
And I'm listening for 45 minutes. Okay. High-ranking source. Okay. I'm not here to pick on Ashley or Megan. Then Ashley goes away. Jim Fitz, you're here. You're the profile. Is he the suspect? Is he the kidnapper? The abductor? I said, and I just said, Megan, I'm not on the inside. I don't have whatever source she has. But number one, family inner circle is always the first suspect. You heard us say this on shows
Yeah.
that you recruited us to come on. So that's common sense. And I said, there's nothing wrong with the police keeping the car a week later in the impoundment lot, whatever, which is apparently what they did and what Ashley was reporting. I just said, Megan, I said, he may be a suspect, but he may not. He is one of many at this point, and he could go up or go down on the prioritization scale and see where that is. So yeah, it is very difficult in that regard. And Ray, you and I have been on the other side. We get phone calls from journalists, some that we know and we've dealt with in the past, and they're asking us questions. And I mean, back in the day when we were both still FBI agents, or before that, I was a police officer. And you got to really be careful and circumspect. In the FBI, I used to give background, and I was allowed to do that. I get a phone call, Jim, there's this murder out in the Midwest, blah, blah, blah. I said, I can't talk about that. But other murders, in the Midwest or elsewhere, here's what sometimes happens. And they would take that information and do whatever they wanted with it. And well, can you make a phone call? I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I respect you doing your job, Mr.
I've asked that.
And once or twice maybe, and you asked, and I said, I can't do that, and we just go on from there. And I would never want to put anyone in the spot. And Ray, I know you've been in situations like that too. And it's I as a journalist, you want those inside sources. We talked earlier about attorneys, both defense and prosecutors. They will certainly float these trial balloons and put these red herrings out there in different directions. That's kind of their job, to try to, of course, influence a potential or future jury pool. And you can question the ethics of that and how it's done and why it's done, but that's certainly part of their overall strategy. And sometimes the defense will do it and the prosecution feels they have to do something in turn, whether it's just a statement on a microphone at a podium, or are they in fact putting out some sort of information through one of their own people to an investigative or to a journalist of any sort. So it really can get complicated and cloudy there. And the good part is your book describes all this stuff and the ethos of it on both sides. And the bottom line is, as long as the right person is arrested and convicted for whatever crime it was, I suppose the end justifies the means, but sometimes it gets cloudy otherwise.
I think you just don't want to let yourself be used without giving it thought. I think as a journalist, I will tell you, in the Charlie Kirk case, I found this really troubling when, the governor says that we got our guy and he's getting the death penalty, and he hasn't even been inside, the DA, all of it was just so over the top. And I think on the other side, the conspiracy theorists, that's become crazy because in a lot of these cases, they're not putting enough light on what's happening in the courtroom. If you don't give people like an open trial where they could see what's happening, that allows those theories to flourish. Got to balance it against the right of the defendant to, his right to a fair trial. But I have to say, as a journalist, I don't really have to worry about what those arguments are going to be. I just don't want to report one side of them. And I want to make sure that somebody's getting a balanced, view of what's happening, what the prosecution will be arguing and what the defense will be arguing. And I don't want to be somebody's tool for how that's going to play out with potential juries. I try to be careful about it. If I can substantiate what they're saying, fine. The conspiracy theories, I did an interview, or I produced an interview with Brian Henton with two of the sheriffs from the Utah County. And they talked about how these things are out of control with the conspiracy theories and gave us, some information and about how they found the gun, period. Okay. So they found the gun. They didn't talk about all the evidence and what's on the gun and that sort of thing. that's been reported, but it was good to talk to them about what the process was to try to push down some of the other theories about, oh, the gun was never found, or they planted the gun there. Just, the rifle following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But I just think we need to wait and see what happened here. I mean, there's a witness who was his room. I mean, what role did that witness play? Or is that witness cooperating, or is he not cooperating? We've tried to be very circumspect about our reporting in Charlie Kirk because it is a minefield. And I know for Brian, Anton, and for myself, and we work together a lot at News Nation, and that neither one of us want to be the conduit of misinformation or just be used by somebody for certain purposes. So it's important to stand up and think about why somebody wants to talk to you, not just that you got somebody to talk to you. I got the interview with so and so. Well, why?
Yeah.
I always said, and I'll let Ray go here, but I always said with informants in the FBI, cooperating witnesses, tell me you want money. And as long as the information's good and we can then prove a case against someone, that's why I want it. Maybe an investigative, hey, give me $1,000, I'll give you information. As long as, of course, you can prove it. You may want to get a second or third source at the same time. But otherwise, with the hidden agendas or even overt agendas, that's very much problematic in that regard.
Or put it in your piece. So and so, this source inside the investigation, or this source inside the defense of so and so says such and such. Now you decide how much weight or credibility you want to give it.
Sure. Good point.
We look at your book, Murder in the Media, and you picked 4 great cases. I figure you have your reasons for why you picked those cases, but you talk about some evidence in the trials that never made it to the light of day. Why is that never does? And is the courtroom really where truth comes out, or is it more about a controlled narrative?
It's more about a controlled narrative. I mean, you've been in enough courtrooms.
I
It's
get
a
it.
very.
I never heard a lawyer say that, though, Allison.
It's a controlled narrative because, and also some of the evidence that doesn't make it in, it wasn't collected properly, it isn't, or it is too prejudicial. It will change everybody's viewpoint before they actually hear the rest of the evidence. There are reasons for it, or somebody's just really successful in making a good argument to keep it out. For me, sometimes it's really frustrating sometimes because you do know things. Certainly with the Koberger case that had happened that didn't, it didn't go to trial, but there was a lot of things that weren't going to make it into that trial. There was incredible amount of secrecy before the trial. There was a pile on the roommates who had witnessed this or had been there and had managed to survive this horrific event. 4 murders in the building, and then, they were this or they're doing that, and there was evidence to show what actually happened with them if it had gone to trial. So I don't think any of that, I think a lot of that wouldn't have come in, and they would have been left with these kind of stained reputations that continue to foster online. Unfair, I believe, just personally. That's my personal opinion. It wouldn't be something I would write, but yeah. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones, we covered, I've covered so many different cases, and so much is left on the cutting room floor, so to speak, where it doesn't serve the prosecution's purpose, and it obviously doesn't serve the defense's purpose, and they just don't put it forward. With Robert Blake, there was a whole nother aspect to that case that didn't become public until there was a civil trial where they managed to get it in, that she had a child, that she had been both Christian Brando and Robert Blake, and that had lied about who the father was because she would have preferred it to be Christian Brando. And Marlon Brando was all excited about that because he wanted, his son to have a child. It wasn't happening. His son had bad drug problems and so forth. So I, probably just so many things that just don't make it, and it's super frustrating. I understand it as a lawyer because you try to keep out those things that will really just one testimony or one person saying something could just like it's over. And that's kind of what I would hear. Even at the trial, at the Holly Bobo trial, the defendant had shot his mother in the knee. I mean, he had a history of tremendous drug abuse. He was a complete and total loser, violent against his family. I interviewed the mom who talked about what a sweetheart he was, the one he shot. And I know it was a hard interview to do without like smiling, but like, my son is an angel. Except for when he shoots.
Except for when he shoots me, yeah, right. Other than that,
I mean, I should, because it was all so tragic, but none of that came in. We didn't really hear much about his past. It was really just, it wasn't, we weren't talking about it wasn't related to anything that had happened with the murder and abduction and rape of Holly Bobo. So it didn't come in as a prior bad act or anything like that. So, but probably if you'd heard a little bit about this guy's past, they probably, I mean, they convicted him anyway, but they would have really convicted him faster. And like, right, I mean, it would have been over because it just seemed like, oh, that's the guy, that meth head guy who's always doing drugs. That's the like would do something like this. And he always had a thing for Holly and so forth and so on. So yeah, I find it frustrating sometimes. I know it's the way the system works. I find when I'm in court, maybe in most of the cases, the large percent of the cases go the way they're supposed to, but I also see bad behavior from both sides. And I also think that the government, from the cases that I've covered, the prosecutors overkill. I mean, because I guess they know that it could be just one person, but they do too much. When they have a good, strong case, that is not right. And I've seen that a lot. In smaller places, not even in larger places. It's just sort of like over the top. But I guess there's a method to that madness because it could just be one person who says no, you know what I mean? And then you have a killer. I understand the impetus to not play by the rules by both sides, but it's hard to watch sometimes.
you know,
It makes me.
Go ahead.
just people don't realize, but before the opening statements and we'll just say criminal trial for now, there are days, if not weeks, of pre-trial motions that go before judges, suppression hearings, trying to get evidence thrown out. The defense will want this witness thrown out or this evidence from a search warrant thrown out. We went through months of it in the Unabomb case and other cases I was involved in. I know Ray too. So there's a whole lot of these decisions that are made at a jury, and this is not in front of a jury, only in front of a judge. So for the non-lawyers out there, the evidence that you may see if you're sitting on a jury that may have been debated for weeks prior to that, whether that's allowed, whether certain experts allowed, and if that expert can say certain things or not say certain things. And I've been, in that case too, in different trials in which I was providing expert testimony. So yeah, and then a lot of it, of course, I'm also hearing from prosecutors that nowadays they call it these CSI juries,
Right.
and if they don't have DNA, if they don't have blood that absolutely points to the person, or surveillance, video surveillance of the crime being committed, it's a lot tougher to get a prosecution, to get a conviction in that regard. And for hundreds of years, there's been prosecutions without DNA linkage, or certainly video camera type of evidence. But nowadays these shows are on TV where everything is solved in 42 minutes, including I was a technical advisor for Criminal Minds, and
Yeah.
I said, can we make this at least 2 episodes and have an arc? No, we don't do that. Formulas, everything solved in that episode. Well, it wouldn't happen this way in real life. Thanks, Fitz, but we're still going to do it this way. Okay. And so, yeah, there is a lot
That
that
goes with
happens.
it. It's a streamlined narrative. It happens
Mhm.
weeks before the trial starts,
Yeah.
where they throw. And I do think everybody expects like a CSI or a Criminal Minds kind of case where there's like, and yeah, and they expect it to be fast. It's kind of what's happening with Guthrie. Everybody's like, whoa, why haven't they gotten? Why isn't it over? So it, it's it's a difficult process, but it does tend to work. It does tend to get a lot of bad people. I mean, I have to say, when I'm sitting there, and I'm always ridiculed because I will not say anybody's guilty, and it makes some of the prosecutors or people or law enforcement that I'm talking to absolutely bonkers. I'm not saying they're not guilty, but I'm going to wait until I see what goes down
Sure.
based on watching in the courtroom. I'm not going to report on all that extraneous stuff unless it's been an emotion or that it's real, not just that it's somebody chatting about it, because there's a lot of chitter chatter around a case. So that happens.
Oh, yeah.
And it's fun to cover, you're like, oh, and I heard so and so beat their wife before they did this. And like you look at the records and there's nothing and it's not in any of the motions. But you saw that like with Harvey Weinstein too, with to all of the victims, and then it gets overturned. They put too many past prior bad acts. And so you have to be careful about what gets into. It's not necessarily always a bad thing. You want to preserve the record so that you did everything right, and it won't be overturned on appeal, or it will be overturned on appeal. So there's a lot of that going on too, depending on which side you're on.
What you say about and I've been involved in dozens of trials, but it really is about the controlled narrative, and it's not really juries deciding the truth. They're really deciding who told the best story.
Well, I don't know, Ray. That's so cynical.
I know, but I mean, haven't seen it and talk about the CSI and all the things that you need to bring in to solidify what you're doing. It's all about, because a lot of times when you have cases, unless there's a smoking gun, most of it
Right.
is circumstantial. So
It
it's all.
also makes sense. I mean,
Mhm.
I've seen that if they're telling a really good story, and I've seen defense attorneys like try all kinds of different stories, and it just
Yeah.
after sort of like it just doesn't make sense. And I've seen juries understand that, even though they're great storytellers, and generally in a lot of cases, especially the big ones, better than the prosecutors that they're up against. I mean, in state court, in federal court, you usually have a battle of equals. I mean, often, because those jobs, at least coming out of law school, the federal prosecutor jobs are sought like by a lot of really ambitious, good lawyers that have done well in school and are really good at what they do. The state ones, it's kind of learning on your feet, too many cases. It's a bit more difficult, I think. But I've seen some federal prosecutors that are every bit as good as the high priced defense attorneys that that are like superstars. But yeah, it is about the narrative, but it's got to make sense. I mean, the jurors are kind of common sense, and it generally, unless there's like some sort of political thing going on underneath, like we saw with like OJ, or a racism thing or some other motive where they're reacting to their shared experience instead of to what they're listening to, you get to the right place a lot of times.
I've had attorneys, defense attorneys, I swear to God, where they cried during the closing statement. They cried in front of the jury about how their client could never have done this, and they bring the tears, and you could see people almost engaging with the emotion that's being exhibited by the attorney. It's amazing how easy people can be influenced, and then there's some that can't. But I mean, I've seen it all throughout my.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, we used to joke here that unless you caught the person like actually stabbing someone on video in Los Angeles, you're out of luck. I mean, it has to be a videotape murder, and even then, the defense could still mount, could do something and get the person off. I mean, there was a lot of that after OJ, and when I went to Mississippi to cover one of the trials that's in my book, they said to me, they go, it's not going to be any OJ around here. It was 5-day murder trial. You're going to see the swift fist of Mississippi justice. And 5 days later, the woman is convicted and on her way to prison. And I was like, oh my God, probably 2 days of motions before the trial started. And just and polite as can be, great lawyers on both sides, state level. I mean, great, or it's the South. They have some great speakers. I mean, they know how to spin a yarn, both sides. And she was off. And I remember talking to the law enforcement. I go, they didn't even do this or they didn't do that. And he goes, this is not LA. And we're not all obsessed with LA box office. That's what they call it, HBO.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it just depends also what part of the country you're in. Because I mean, I don't see anybody caring if someone's crying in Idaho. This
True.
trial's there.
I think if you watch the movie My Cousin Vinny, you'll get a good example of how some of these trials run in the South.
Good movie.
Yeah.
It is
Good
on
movie.
multiple levels, and
Yeah.
even for expert witnesses and the skill sets they need. Can you real quick tell us a little bit about the Pelicano case? I know there's an
Sure.
FBI involvement in that. I know that's covered in your book,
Yeah.
Murder in the Media. Give us
Yes.
a little summary of that.
Well, I got into a little trouble with that one with the FBI
Mm.
when I covered that story because there were audio recordings that the private eye to the stars, Anthony Pelicano, had made when his clients called in, sort of his insurance, and his clients were people like Brad Gray at a Paramount at the time, or Michael Ovitz, or Steve Bing, billionaire, Kirk Kerkorian, who owned MGM, also a billionaire. There were a lot of billionaires involved. And these recordings were all recordings and FBI 302 subject to a protective order, which meant that all the lawyers that were involved, defense and prosecution, signed a protective order. I got a hold of those recordings and started publishing them in the New York Times, as well as the 302s. And frankly, it wasn't a national security issue. It was rich people being embarrassed who had never expected any of their interviews to be made public. And that includes like people like Warren Beatty, who actually called me up and yelled at me that this was beneath the New York Times to put but this guy was wiretapping people on behalf of very rich and very powerful, the private detective, violating the law. He had a conspiracy going with telephone workers, with police. I mean, it was a big conspiracy. I mean, the low hanging fruit was the police guy, the local detective, and the phone guy. But it was wiretapping. I guess, 80s and 90s style, where they did it. He had invented something that he could put on the telephone, on the box outside, and board. So he'd have to go set it up. And that was done with help from the phone company. There was somebody in the phone company. So they put together a RICO action. So this private detective went to jail for 16 years. But when I got those recordings, the prosecutors called me up screaming at me, the federal prosecutors. And I was at the Times and saying, you're supposed to be one of us, one of the good guys. I mean, you're an officer of the court. And I'm like, I'm a different estate from you. I don't work for the government. I hold power to account. That's my job. So, and I'm not so convinced you're the good guys yet. So we'll put that on hold. And then the case got referred. They opened up an investigation into how I'd gotten the materials in San Diego, from the San Diego FBI, but they never found out.
Well, you'll tell us now, right, on Cold Red?
I'll just say
the statutes run.
I had a lot of phones, and my kids used to laugh because I was like, "Mommy's got to find the right phone."
It's pretty cool. In that case, you had assistant U.S. attorneys calling you and yelling at you, and Warren Beatty. That's not a bad cross section.
It's just he was so out of control. It was just because he hadn't done a solid for his friend Gary Shandling, who had been wiretapped, and Pelicano was found guilty of wiretapping him, and Warren Beatty, who knew about the process of hiring this guy and when he would wiretap people, had warned Gary Shandling. And then when the FBI asked him, he said he didn't know anything about it, and he never told Gary anything. So I didn't find that conversation to be credible. I found Gary Shandling to be credible. And yeah, and it was a pretty irate phone call, like where I actually said to him, he said if he used it was very misogynistic. There's some bad stuff being called of me, and I wasn't having it.
Good
Even
for
though
you, Allison.
I was still not having it. I mean,
I have a couple questions for you,
sure,
because we're getting to our thing, and then the
oh yeah,
audience has some questions too.
Sure.
Have you ever been afraid while covering the case?
Yes. Just mostly about being followed or something after you leave. Yeah. Just mostly somebody following you. But other than that, I'm pretty careful. I have a lot of friends like you guys. I've been told a lot of things to do. I don't stop at gas stations without seeing who's loitering. Only go if there's a bathroom inside, and I don't stay on first floors. And I just do a lot of things. There's things for my door. I'm careful. But yeah, because
Good.
I'm writing, especially when I was writing for the New York Times, there was a lot. I mean, I had a lot of people very angry who had a lot of money.
Did anybody ever try to stop you from digging or going further or following up on leads or threaten you in any way that way?
Yes. In Pelicano, I got threatened a lot. Some of them were kind of silly because it's like, you're never going to go to a party in this town again. A party. That was not a concern. But when I went to visit someone who was, involved in this scheme of wiretapping, I thought, and I went to Century City, which is where all the lawyers are.
Mhm.
I was at the valet, and some guy came by and sideswiped me and hit my purse. He didn't hit me, but I said, "Oh, I guess that guy's like not paying attention." And the valet's like, "No, he was aiming for you."
Wow.
And that guy that I was going to see never saw me, and he knew I was coming.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was a crazy thing. And after I was done, I only did the New York Times for like 4.5, 5 years because I had little kids and it was just too much. I had to stop. It's kind of a balancing act. You can't do despite what everybody says, you can do everything at the same time. So yeah, but that kind of wore me down a little bit. Also having to write responses, I was being lawyered to death by the defendants, like Brad Grace, and like pages and pages, and the New York Times would have me respond. The whole key is to try to keep you from working. So I'm spending time on these documents responding instead of doing my job. So yeah, there was plenty of that. And there was some of it, but nothing as this is my house and my home in town, when I'm in Los Angeles and I was working on this, and they knew where I lived. I had a gate, but it still was. My kids even to this day joke about when they see somebody creepy downstairs, that must be for mommy.
Well, luckily, mommy goes to the firearms range a couple times a year, so she can handle herself.
That's good. That's a good thing.
And just leave it at that, Allison.
Right.
I will.
Jim, you want to jump into some of the questions from the audience?
Yeah. As a question one, as a journalist with a legal background, what is the one piece of evidence you have seen leaked to the media that you think damaged a jury pool? We discussed some of this already, kind of.
We did.
No, I can't remember one thing. It's usually somebody's background, of them being a predator before that maybe won't make it into a trial, that might have helped get somebody convicted. So it's usually that, especially like abusers. When somebody who's raped somebody, and you don't see their whole history. But most of the cases that I've covered, there's convictions. But I mean, when the media is really involved, it doesn't usually come with an acquittal. I mean, besides the couple of famous ones in LA.
Okay.
So yeah, it's
Go ahead.
really about it's leaked out, like what a scumbag somebody is, or a bad person, I should say, gets leaked. And that can, they'll probably be convicted anyway if they'd done something, but that kind of colors everybody's perception. It's hard to undo that once you know. I mean, it's kind of like with the Robert Blake and what they did with the victim. All that bad stuff about that victim, she ended up being somebody that nobody really cared about. I think that was instrumental also, besides the fact that they didn't make a good case. You have to care. You have to care a little bit about they have to have some redeeming quality besides they were a mom. I mean, she wasn't a great mom, at least, because of her other antics. But so, yeah, I think that colored the perception of, for the jury, listening to all the horrible things she'd done to other men.
Yeah.
It's sort of like she needed killing defense. And it had been going on for a long time. So, yeah.
We even saw some of this with the Eric Swalwell matter of a few weeks ago when his attorney came out and, just because he didn't return the phone call the next day, she gets all upset. That doesn't make it rape. Okay. No doubt that there's an attempt to influence a future jury there. I mean, he was trying to keep his job and running for governorship of California. So that's, whether that's leaking evidence or not, it's certainly attempting to taint the public and a future jury pool. And look, innocent till proven guilty. We all agree with that here, but you can go overboard sometimes in challenging or questioning accusers in the way that his attorney did in that case. And it looks like we'll see where that whole case goes, criminal wise or civil wise. But his problems, I think, are still ahead of him in that regard. Another question, Ray, you can ask this one.
You know, when you look at social media and how viral it's become over time, do you think that helps or hinders investigators, both investigators that are journalists and investigators that are in law enforcement?
Well, I'm going to give an old-fashioned answer because this is not something that I just can't stand it. I think it hurts. I think it hurts everybody. I can't tell you, oh, this person was talking. They don't follow any rules. Like at least the media investigators. I mean, the people that are pretending to be journalists. There is a difference. It's not mainstream media versus people online. It's journalists versus non-journalists. Because if you're a journalist, there's certain rules you're supposed to follow, and they don't follow any of them. They just say things. I heard that I saw this from somebody who's covering the Guthrie case. I heard that, something about Tommaso that had nothing to do with anything Ashley Banfield had reported, that he had done something. And I'm not even going to repeat what it was, but I was just like, come on, man. That's just, it's not, yeah. So I think it hurts. I don't know from a real investigator's perspective, if something good comes from there. Even I get tips sometimes on Twitter, or somebody sends it through LinkedIn, and sometimes that's helpful for me to cover something. Not necessarily, I'm not going to take, somebody's like, this happened to me. That doesn't help me. But that's an interesting story. I should probably take a look, especially if it has some significant social importance to me and that it could help somebody. I'll be like, And certainly with the missing persons, if somebody, but for the most part, I think it's kind of a cesspool in there. It's hard to sift through the trash.
I hear you.
I'm going to go to question 4. It's a good one. What's your advice for consumers of true crime on how to spot media bias? However, media bias is defined here, which
I think they should look for more than one source if somebody's telling them something. And that's just a bottom line basic thing, that if they say our source or sources, hopefully it will be more than one. I think if that's media, and if you keep hearing somebody accuse somebody of being guilty while they're talking about a case, they did it, look at this, and he's so clearly, and look at his face while he's smiling while he's in court. I mean, that kind of stuff, that's not helpful. I mean, people have different expressions. There's a camera in there. You can't, they're not actors. I just don't draw a lot from how they're looking, or they're drugged. Sometimes they have a mental illness and they look like don't care, or they're stone faced. I think when somebody's pleading guilty, like Koberger, you could say whatever you want. He's in there and he looked, how he looked, and you can give your, this is what I saw when I was in there. It's clearly subjective. I'm telling you what I saw while I was in the courtroom, and there were cameras. You can judge for yourself, but this is what I thought. But other than that, I don't, I think you look for people telling you who's guilty or innocent in the way they cover the story before we've even had a trial. They can tell you they found this evidence. The police have indicated they found this. This is what's in the search warrant. And we can devote a lot of time to looking at the different items that were found. It's certainly something in the Tyler Robinson case that is helpful. And you look at what they say they got and the text messages, and they put a lot of stuff and made it public. I can report on that. But if I'm telling you, and they also had other conversations we hear about from another friend who lived nearby, that's bias. Really? You heard something like in the hallway? We have text conversations here. Let's focus on those.
Sure.
And are they, people are saying they're written like this or they sound like that. That's your own, think what you want. I'm just going to give you the facts. This is what was put out. And now you can reach your own conclusion.
This last question here is for Jim and I.
Yeah.
It says someone is curious about the relationship between law enforcement officers and journalists. How do we as law enforcement investigators handle it when a journalist like you, Allison, starts looking into one of our active cases?
I mean, yeah.
Go ahead, Allison.
I think that you guys know what to do with that. I mean, when there's a stonewall, if you don't think it's helpful, I could tell you, like, on background, that we're still working on it and we don't have this or that yet. And so we hold off because you want to have an agreement, like, where the law enforcement person trusts you when they do have something that they can say. So I think for law enforcement, I guess you have to use your ability to read people to know who you could trust and not trust. And when I deal with people, I believe you have to earn that trust. So maybe not the first time I call or the second time, but if you tell me something and I say I won't report it, they watch that and they see that you're keeping to your word. As a law enforcement person, I would look for that. That's how I function. And you over the years, I think if people, I know for me, there are a lot of people I can call who know I will not say anything. And that's because I don't until they give me the okay to say something. I don't want to burn somebody who's trying to make a case. I don't want to, it's my job is not more important than their job. Me being successful is not more important than whoever I'm talking to. I feel that way with families too. It's just, it's a case. There's a lot at stake. They're high stakes and there's a lot of important things going on, but you still have to keep in mind that they're doing you a favor by even talking to you, and that you don't want to burn people and have them, like, be fired or have the family hurt again, or even the defendant, like, that he didn't get a fair trial because you have a big mouth and had to go first. And you told him you say something, but you do it anyway. So again, I go back to the rules. And I think if you don't have that integrity and you can't stick to it, then you shouldn't be in the job. And I will tell you that a lot of people that think, I mean, like those prosecutors, the federal prosecutors in Pelicano, felt I didn't have integrity, but I did not break any laws in getting that evidence. I was not a signature to the protective order. And I remember saying this to them, and I was not acting as an officer of the court. I was acting as a journalist. I wasn't acting as an attorney. And you have to, I stick to my moral compass, but I think for investigators, they need to be sure they get trust you before they start telling you anything. That's the way it works.
I remember in the Bureau, we were strictly prohibited from talking to anyone.
You guys are tough.
We had someone that was designated who was our PIO, our media representative, that would do all the talking. Now, they would come to us and ask questions, but they would only release certain information. But, when you look at the relationship, and there's many individuals that have come up when I was working cases and they were in court and they wanted to talk to us. And on the surface, it looks like it's cooperative, but underneath, there's a lot of controlled tension. You think about it, because I'm kind of in a information management mode. In other words, my priority is simply not to say anything or provide any information that's going to jeopardize any prosecution, and that's my main goal. So I find it, just for me, I would just say I'm not allowed to discuss it, and that was the end of it, unless it's over, and then there is no bars to it.
Even when it's over, I think it's tough with the FBI guys and gals. But I still have people that will tell me things, so I'll be ready. But I think, if I have to say, and this is sort of against interest, but I think in the Guthrie case, the sheriff, with the haphazard, all over the place messages was a disaster for us as journalists trying to get out a message about what was happening. It didn't calm the public. It made things worse. The timeline shifting, when to bring in video, what video they should be looking for, if they needed a consistent PIO, a public person, public information, talking about the case, so that everybody got the same information, instead of somebody doing, like the sheriff doing interviews in the middle of the night with local or with NBC or whatever it was. And then we'd be like, what did the sheriff say there? Well, that's not what he said during the press conference. And it just, so the mixed messages could be problematic for everyone.
Sure.
But my job is to try to get you to say something to me.
Well, now, I mean,
What-
now when I know when Jim, now when I talk to you, Allison, it's like talking to another agent, or it's like talking to a assistant United States attorney. We just talk about everything. There's no holds barred, and it's great because when I talk to you, I've talked to a lot of different producers, and none of them have the acumen that you do to be able to understand what I'm saying, and you just have that way that you get it right away. I don't have to explain anything to you, which is nice.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I feel the same way
Uh, just to kind of
about you
wind
both.
things.
About
Well, thank you, Allison. Just to wind things down here, Ray is right about the FBI. We're not authorized to talk to anyone in the world of journalism. I've never been a source for a journalist. In my 31 years in law enforcement, Ray, I haven't been with you every single day at your desk, but I know you haven't either.
Mhm.
It's just something you don't want to do. Now, I have been asked and given official permission to
Correct.
be do proactive interviews, if not like town halls when they're looking for a serial rapist, serial
Mhm.
killer of some sort, and it's been promoted by the FBI. I've been the anointment to go ahead and do it. So that's all authorized, and even afterwards, other reporters will come up to you, ask questions. That's all authorized. Uh, I remember doing a presser after the 9/11 and anthrax attacks in the fall of 2001, and reporters were calling me left and right, and they go through our headquarters and go from there. And I'll never forget for some of the things I said, I loosely connected the anthrax mailer to someone who's kind of personality wise like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. And a few people said, all right, that's interesting, whatever. It took about 8 months later when the Wall Street Journal published a column by one of their columnists, and he did his best to tear me apart. You know it came from Iraq. You know it was Saddam Hussein involved in the anthrax case. And I so wanted to respond. I talked to our media person. No, you're in the FBI. You can't write a letter to the editor. But they're wrong. I know I'm right. No one knew anything back then. About 4 years later, it turns out it was a guy exactly like I described. And my last story here, I put this in my most recent book. Um, a reporter for CBS named James Stewart. He interviewed me about the abortion doctor sniper guy back in the late 90s. Not the actor James Stewart, he's a reporter. And I was a little unsure how he handled that whole interview because it made it look like I said something I didn't say when that piece aired on 60 Minutes too. About 5 years later, I get a call, and Jim Stewart would call me every once in a while in the meantime. About 5 years later, I get a frantic call, a couple of voicemails at my FBI office. Call me back, call me back. Finally, I answer the phone. Jim, you're this like forensic linguist guy, right? I said, yeah, something like that. He goes, he goes, can you help? Can you look at a typewriter font and tell me what year that typewriter or word processor, whatever it was, came out? I said, that's not my skill set, but our laboratory does this. He said, well, do you think you could develop a skill set and come on CBS? I'm thinking, what's all this about? And Allison, you probably remember, I know Ray does. It was the 2004 election, Bush versus Kerry, and
Mhm.
about a month before the October surprise, it may have been in September, about some letter to the National Guard trying to get George Bush W out of going to Vietnam, whatever. And I wish I could claim I'm the one that saw the font and figured out it was a bogus letter, but it was supposed to be dated like 1972 or something. But the font came off of a IBM printer or something like that, or a Microsoft font from the early 90s, and this was 2004. And Jim Stewart so wanted me to be able to come on the air and give him some information. My point is here, when that phone rings from a journalist, sometimes the agenda could be even different than the story itself. He was trying to protect Dan Rather, who eventually lost his job over that reportage of that case. So, uh, yeah, most reporters I know over the years I trusted, and until they've violated that trust, Allison, I know you're not full-time investigative journalist right now, but you're great at what you do in terms of working for the various entertainment outlets over the years, News Nation now, and we thank you for inviting me and Ray on News Nation to render opinions when we seem appropriate. Ray, any final words? We'll get some from Allison and we'll sign us out.
No, just this has been fantastic, Allison. You are amazing. Thank you so much for being with
Thanks.
us tonight.
Thanks for having me, and I love having you guys on News Nation. It's just it's a whole nother level of like really finding out information and intelligence and experience, and it helps our viewers understand things better. And you have, like you said, places you don't go when you don't know something, which is always also refreshing.
Mm.
If you know, working on things and caveats, and I think that's really people.
Yeah, and we talk about investigative journalists and reporters who have credentials and bona fides, and I would just say everyone out there watches cable news and even some podcasts realizes some of these so-called law enforcement experts, we can question some of their backgrounds too in terms of what they really went through. There's a number of people, they put 5 or 10 years in the bureau, maybe some other agency, get out, write a book. Some are okay. Some I really question some of what they say, and at least one or two out there over the years, almost borderline dangerous. Some of the stuff they're putting out there. So I just be cautious. We can pick apart journalists when they get something wrong or get it right,
Yep.
but even the experts that come on in any field, make sure you know that they're talking the talk. Make sure you look into their background and they've walked the walk. And Ray, I think you and I can claim we've done both. We're doing more talking now than walking like we did in the old days, but we've certainly proved our point back then. Allison, the book is Murder in the Media. Where can people get it? Website, anything
Amazon,
like
it's
that?
out right now, Amazon.com, or you can get it on Barnes and Noble or at a bookstore near you. So you can get it online or at a bookstore if you want to go and forage around. Yeah.
Well, I know it's a good book. I've read through some of it, and folks, you're out there. If you anything you enjoy about true crime, you're going to enjoy this book too, right? Because Allison really takes you behind the scenes into the courtroom, which is really you don't see that on TV. You don't see Criminal Minds. You never see them testifying, writing their reports. That's where it all comes down to, and Allison really covers it well in this book. So, everyone, again, thanks, Allison, for coming on with us tonight. Folks, I hope
Thank you.
you enjoyed this episode of Cold Red. Please like, subscribe, tell other people about us. Check out our website, coldredpodcast.com. We want to thank Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, our producers, Rick Schilling, our music coordinator. And everybody, please come back next time and catch another episode of